I found a handwritten note tucked between the Dollar Tree picture frames. It said, "I love how you look at yourself in mirrors." My apartment had no mirrors. It was around 7 p.m. when I entered the Dollar Tree on Michigan Avenue. The wind had picked up, and I had to squint to keep the dust out of my eyes. The weather was weird. A dust storm had been brewing all day, the kind that left everything gritty, and the air felt thick with the sand it carried. I remember thinking how the evening had already been off-kilter, like everything around me was holding its breath. I had just moved into a new apartment in Chicago, a little studio on the 3rd floor. It was small, but it was mine. That's why I found myself here. Dollar Tree was close, and I needed some cheap photo frames to hang a few pictures. Something to make my new place feel a little more like home. As I walked through the aisles, the fluorescent lights buzzed above me. The noise mixed with the occasional sound of someone sneezing or coughing, probably due to the dust storm. The store was practically empty. Just a few people in the back, browsing the cleaning supplies. I grabbed a couple of frames, turned the corner, and that's when I noticed it. A folded slip of paper was wedged between 2 photo frames on the shelf. At first, I didn't think much of it. Maybe it was just some random receipt someone had tucked away in a hurry. But something about the way it was placed caught my attention. It seemed too deliberate, too careful. Curious, I pulled the paper out and unfolded it. The handwriting was neat, almost polite, the letters rounded and evenly spaced. It read, "You're prettier in person than through your window. P.S. Your cat's name is Miso, right?" I froze. My heart skipped a beat, and the world around me seemed to momentarily go still. I stared at the words, my blood turning cold. There was no way someone could know that. I never brought Miso to this store. The store felt suddenly smaller, the air heavier. My hand shook slightly as I folded the note back up and shoved it into my pocket. I tried to ignore the knot forming in my stomach. Maybe it was a prank. Maybe some weird coincidence. I left the store quickly, too quickly, without even picking up the photo frames. The dust storm outside felt less irritating now. It felt like the world was waiting for something I didn't understand. That night, as I sat in my apartment with the note hidden in my drawer, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been watching me. I was in my living room, trying to watch a movie, but I couldn't focus. All I could think about was Miso, my orange tabby. She was my constant companion, always by my side, no matter where I went. I wasn't the kind of person to overreact, but the more I thought about the note, the more I realized how wrong everything felt. Why had the person mentioned Miso? And how did they know her name? The only people who knew her name were my neighbors, a few friends, and, well, me. I had never mentioned her to anyone in public, not at the Dollar Tree, not to any stranger. The next day I called the store. I wasn't sure what I expected. Maybe I thought someone would admit to leaving the note. Maybe they'd laugh it off. But they didn't. Instead, they offered to pull the security footage for me. They said they could check the cameras to see if anyone had been near the frames around the time I was there. I agreed, feeling slightly absurd. But what else could I do? I wasn't about to sit with that feeling gnawing at me for days. A couple of hours later, the store manager called me back. "We found something odd," he said. "There's footage of a man. He's in a baseball cap, and he's been lingering near the frames for 22 minutes. I could feel the blood drain from my face. He continued, "He's just standing there, walking around the frames, staring at the shelves. But we see you come in, pick up the frames, and leave. He leaves after you do, like he was waiting for someone." My stomach dropped. I didn't even want to know what else they had on that footage. I drove to the store the next day to meet with the manager, eager to see the footage myself. As the manager showed me the security tape, my breath caught in my throat. The man in the baseball cap stood by the frames, shifting from foot to foot, looking around as if waiting for something. It was hard to make out his face, but his posture was tense, like he was trying to blend in. But he clearly wasn't. And then, just as I had left, the man moved in. He picked up the frames I had been looking at, turned them over in his hands, and, for a moment, his fingers brushed against the spot where I had found the note. I sat frozen, watching the screen. This wasn't just a coincidence. This was calculated. The man had been watching me, waiting for me. He knew exactly when I would be there. He knew the moment to slip the note into the frame. But what really sent chills down my spine was when the manager paused the footage. "Look here," he said, pointing to the timestamp. "There's a van parked outside, across the street, in the same spot where you parked. It's not a coincidence. It looks like the guy was waiting for you to leave." I felt my heart hammer in my chest. That was my parking spot. And that van. I had seen it 3 times that week, parked just a few feet from my apartment building. Each time, it was there for no reason. Just parked, engine running, the driver, always hidden inside. The police were called, and they traced the van's license plate back to a maintenance company. They found the vehicle parked near my building, just as I had suspected. When the police opened the van, they found something disturbing. They found a map. An old, worn-out map of my neighborhood, with certain places circled. My gym, my work, my therapist's office. It was like someone had been tracking my every move, my routines, my schedule. And, in the glove compartment, they found something that made my stomach turn. 37 handwritten notes, each one personalized for a different woman. Each note described an interaction the man had witnessed. Details like what clothes they wore, where they'd been, who they were with. But what stuck out most was the last one. It read, "Practice makes perfect." The notes were in different handwriting styles, as though he'd practiced over time, perfecting each one, tailoring it to each woman. The more I looked at the stack, the more I realized how meticulous and calculating he had been. The police didn't have enough evidence to charge the man right away, but when they brought him in for questioning, they discovered something chilling. The man had been stalking me for months. The notes, the receipts, the van. It was all part of his plan to get closer to me. He'd watched me from afar, learning my schedule, my habits. But the worst part? He wasn't just stalking me. The notes weren't just for me. The van's glove compartment held dozens of notes, each one for a different woman. Each one personalized, each one a piece of a twisted puzzle. He wasn't just obsessed with me. He had been watching and following other women from the Dollar Tree, compiling notes and receipts for each of them. I stood in my apartment later that night, staring at the empty spot on the wall where the photo frame used to be. My cat, Miso, curled up in the corner, oblivious to the nightmare that had unfolded. We thought the car parked next to ours at Dollar Tree was empty, until its trunk started thumping as we loaded our bags. It was one of those regular late-night trips. Tyler and I were at the Dollar Tree, stocking up on snacks and random items for the weekend. Nothing extraordinary. The kind of errand you do on autopilot without really thinking about it. It was around 9:30 p.m., 15 minutes before closing. The lot was nearly empty, except for a few other cars parked around the edges. Tacoma wasn't exactly bustling at this hour, and the rain had started to fall heavily, leaving the pavement slick with puddles. We were tossing the bags into the back seat of my car, cracking jokes about the ridiculous things you can find in Dollar Tree when we heard it. Thud, thud, thud. The sound came from the rusty sedan parked next to us. At first, I thought it was the trunk of some car that had gotten stuck or was malfunctioning. But the thumping was rhythmic, and it didn't stop. Tyler raised an eyebrow and glanced at me. "Someone's groceries are pissed," he joked, tossing another bag into the back seat. I let out a small laugh, but the sound kept going. It wasn't the kind of noise you'd expect from someone loading groceries. It was deeper, more insistent. I turned toward the sedan. That's when I saw it. There was no one in the front seats, just empty, faded upholstery. The car looked old, with rust spots on the doors and a cracked windshield. Nothing fancy, nothing special. I took a step closer to the car, my curiosity starting to outweigh my caution. I glanced at the trunk. The lock was scratched raw, the metal worn down, like someone had been trying to force it open. The thumping continued, faster now, followed by a muffled sound. Help. It was soft, barely audible over the thumping. My heart skipped a beat. Was someone inside the trunk? Tyler must have noticed the change in my expression because he stopped what he was doing and looked at me. "What's up?" he asked, his voice a little sharper now. "I think there's someone in there," I muttered, taking a few more steps toward the sedan. The trunk. It's locked, but something's definitely moving inside. Tyler didn't hesitate. He pulled his phone from his pocket and started to unlock his car. "We need to call the police," he said, his voice tense. I nodded, but just as I reached for my phone, I heard a sound behind me. I spun around, my heart racing. "Problem with my car?" A man's voice. It was low and smooth, but there was something about it that made me freeze. I turned around to see him standing right behind us, just a few feet away. He was tall, wearing a dark hoodie with the hood pulled up, his face partially obscured by the shadows. In his hand, he held a pair of jumper cables, but something was off. The cables were dripping something dark, something I didn't want to think about. I could feel the tension in the air, thick and suffocating. My instinct screamed at me to turn and run, but I stood, frozen in place. Something wasn't right. Before I could even react, Tyler spoke, his voice shaking slightly. "What's going on? We heard someone in your trunk." The man's eyes flicked toward the sedan, then back to us. He smiled, but it wasn't a reassuring smile. It was cold, calculating. "Nothing to worry about," he said, taking a slow step toward us. "Just a little car trouble. I don't mean any harm." I didn't believe him. I knew there was no way this was just a coincidence. That sound, the thumping, the muffled plea for help, had been real. But the way he was acting, so calm, made my stomach churn. Why hadn't he called for help if his car was the problem? Why was he standing so close to us? Tyler moved slightly in front of me, his body tense. I could see his hand inching toward his phone, probably ready to call 911, but the man seemed to sense this. "Don't make a scene," he warned, his tone low, almost like a threat. I glanced at the car, then back at the man. He wasn't looking directly at us now. He was focused on something in the distance, almost like he was gauging his next move. His grip tightened on the jumper cables. That's when it hit me. He wasn't trying to fix his car. He was distracting us. The thumping from the trunk? It was a game, a diversion, something to keep us occupied while he made sure we didn't notice him approaching us. I turned quickly to Tyler. "Call the police now," I whispered urgently. But before Tyler could react, the man stepped back. "It's all right," he said, his voice much colder now. "I'll be leaving now. But don't think you've seen the last of me." Without another word, he turned and walked toward his car. He didn't even glance back, didn't give us a chance to ask more questions. He just got into his car, slammed the door, and drove off into the rain. Tyler and I stood there, frozen, the tension still thick in the air. The sound of the rain falling around us seemed to come back into focus, the world slowly starting to return to normal. We stood there for a few more seconds before we both turned and ran to my car. I didn't feel safe. Not anymore. I threw the bags into the back seat, slammed the door, and locked it. Tyler was still fumbling with his phone, trying to get through to the police. But when he tried to dial, nothing happened. The call wouldn't connect. "Shit!" he cursed, trying again, but it was no use. We were in the middle of the parking lot, and the only other car in sight had already left. I felt isolated, vulnerable. and the knot in my stomach only tightened. The man had come too close. The whole situation had felt wrong from the start. Tyler turned to me, his face pale. "We need to go," he said, his voice shaky. "Now." Finally, we drove off. I bought a $1.25 keychain at Dollar Tree. That night, my front door unlocked itself, and the security footage showed someone testing the key against my lock 3 days earlier. It was one of those gloomy Thursday afternoons in Tacoma, rain pouring steadily against the windows. The kind of day that makes you want to stay inside with a hot drink. But I needed to get out, and I'd promised myself I'd go to Dollar Tree to pick up a few things for the weekend. The weather didn't seem to bother me as much as it should have, especially with the heavy rain and how the streets were flooding. I just needed to get away for a bit. I don't usually buy anything special at Dollar Tree, just random things I didn't really need. But today, I was in the mood for something simple. A little keychain, maybe, to remind myself of the few trips I had taken over the summer. I walked into the store, the smell of cheap plastic filling the air as I navigated my way to aisle 4, where all the keychains were hanging from overcrowded hooks. I spent a few minutes scanning the rows of keychains. Nothing too flashy, just the usual ones. Mini flashlights, sports team logos, the odd heart-shaped ones. I had my eye on a heart-shaped keychain with a cute engraving, but of course, it was sold out. I sighed, then grabbed a basic black keychain. Nothing special, just a backup. At $1.25, it didn't matter much. The cashier, a nervous young guy who seemed a little out of place, took the keychain, scanned it, and started bagging my items. His hands fumbled slightly, dropping my keys twice before finally getting them into the bag. "Sorry about that," he mumbled, his voice shaky. It's my first shift." "No worries," I replied with a half smile, though his nervousness made me uncomfortable. It was just a little exchange, but I couldn't help but notice how his eyes lingered on my keys as he bagged them. I didn't think much of it then. It was just a nervous cashier, right? I paid and left, the steady rain tapping against the roof of my car. The keychain was simple, nothing remarkable. I shoved the bag in the passenger seat and headed back home, the dreary weather making everything feel unusually still. I got home around 9 p.m., parked my car, and went inside. It had been a long day, and I was looking forward to relaxing. I made dinner, watched some TV, and then went to bed early, still feeling the weariness from the week. I wasn't sure what time it was when I woke up, but something felt off. It was 2:17 a.m. when my phone buzzed with a notification from my Nest camera. "Movement detected at the front door," it read. I sat up in bed, confusion clouding my thoughts. I checked the live footage, my heart beginning to pound in my chest. The video feed was playing, my front door opening wide. There was no one in sight. The door moved on its own, like it had been gently pushed. I squinted at the screen, rewinding, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The door swinging open, but no one in view. The footage was blurry and too dark, but it didn't look right. I immediately got up and went to the front door, feeling that tightness in my chest. When I checked the lock, I found something even more unsettling. Fresh scratch marks on the metal, as though someone had been testing the lock. I stepped back, my head spinning. I checked my phone again. No alerts for anything else. No signs of forced entry. But the door had definitely been opened. I immediately checked all the other locks in the house, and everything else was secure. I felt the panic start to rise as I tried to convince myself it was nothing. Maybe it had been the wind. Maybe I was imagining things. But that instinct was still there, tugging at me. Something was wrong. The next morning, I called the police. I wasn't sure what to expect. After all, Nothing had been stolen, no one had come inside, but the scratch marks and the footage were enough to make me uneasy. A responding officer came by to take a look, and after reviewing the video, he promised to send someone out to check things further. But, without any direct evidence of a break-in, I knew there wasn't much they could do. I couldn't stop thinking about it. I kept replaying the video, watching the door swing open and close, trying to make sense of it. Who had been there? Who had touched my door? And why? Then, something strange happened. I went back to the footage on my phone and noticed something that made my stomach turn. In the background, barely visible, was a shadow. It was hard to see, but it looked like someone had been standing just outside my door before the door opened. I couldn't be sure, but the figure seemed to vanish as soon as the door moved. I told myself I was overreacting. Maybe it was just a trick of the light. Maybe I was still groggy from sleep, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I had been watched. Later that evening, I received a call from the police. They had tracked the footage and discovered something disturbing. The man in the baseball cap, the same cashier from Dollar Tree, had been lurking near my apartment the night before. He had been caught on nearby surveillance cameras, hanging around the building for over 20 minutes, seemingly watching the front door. I felt the color drain from my face. How was this possible? Why would a cashier from a store I'd visited just a few days ago be anywhere near my apartment? They traced his movements to a van parked near my building. The police had already started tracking his vehicle, which had no business being in the area. The real shock came when they searched the van. Inside, they found a key-cutting machine, neatly packed in the back, along with a stack of receipts from Dollar Tree. Each receipt had a timestamp. My purchase, along with dozens of others, was circled. The police dug deeper, and when they checked the security footage again, it revealed something chilling. The cashier, whose name was Michael, had palmed my keys when he dropped them. For 22 seconds, he had my keys in his hands, just long enough to get a perfect impression. The keychain I had bought wasn't just an ordinary one. The weighted end of the keychain had been designed to hold a mold for an impression key. Nothing obvious, just subtle enough to be overlooked. Michael had used the keychain as a tool to create a duplicate of my key. The scratch marks on the door were from him testing the key, trying it out on my front door. It wasn't just a random act of stalking. He was methodical, building his plans piece by piece. I never imagined that a simple keychain could lead to something so terrifying. On my third day at Dollar Tree, a man paid with warm coins while staring at my name tag. That night, I found them arranged on my car in a heart shape. I had just started my third day at Dollar Tree, and I was finally getting into the rhythm of things. The cash register was familiar now. The aisles, the customers, all predictable. It was a quiet evening, the kind where you could hear the soft hum of fluorescent lights above you and the sound of the mop bucket sloshing around in the back room. I was closing register number 1, finishing up the last few transactions of the night when he walked in. Carl. He'd been coming to the store for as long as I could remember, always around the same time, and always buying the same odd items: duct tape, box cutters, and occasionally a few rolls of string or rope. I didn't know why, but every time he paid, it felt like he was watching me a little too closely. His eyes lingered on me, studying my movements, but I always brushed it off as paranoia. Tonight, he did the usual. He slapped down 2 rolls of duct tape and 1 box cutter on the counter. Then, he started counting out coins, hot pennies. I could feel the warmth of them as he slid them across the counter toward me. He always paid in loose change, like he was trying to make a point or just get rid of the coins. "Marcus," he said, his voice oddly cold as he stared at my name tag. My son's name was Marcus, too. I froze for a second. He'd never said anything like that before. His words felt too pointed, too personal. I forced a smile, but my hands were starting to sweat. Nice, I managed, trying to keep the conversation neutral. Carl didn't break eye contact. His gaze never wavered as he slid the coins into my palm. The warmth from the pennies made me feel uncomfortable, as if something was just wrong about the whole exchange. He gathered his items, took his receipt, and walked out the door without saying another word. As soon as Carl left, my manager, Jess, pulled me aside. Her face was tight, her eyes darting to the door where Carl had just exited. "That's Carl," she said, lowering her voice. "We banned him last year. He'd been photographing the teen staff, creeped everyone out. The cops said he's harmless, but he's not." I stared at her, trying to process what she was saying. Photographing the staff? For what? Jess gave a shaky sigh. "We don't know. He kept saying he liked to capture the moment, whatever that means. But after we reported him, he was banned from the store. He started coming back after a few months, always trying to engage with the new hires. I don't know what he's up to, but just keep an eye on him. If he comes back again, let me know right away." I nodded, though I could already feel a knot tightening in my stomach. Carl had always been strange, but now, knowing about his past behavior made everything feel worse. The rest of the night dragged on, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. After the store closed, I grabbed my stuff, locked up the register, and headed out to the parking lot. The rain had started up again, falling in thick sheets, making the pavement shimmer with wetness. When I reached my car, I noticed something immediately. The door was unlocked. I always locked my car without fail. But tonight, the door was wide open, just a crack. I paused, my breath catching in my throat. I checked the back seat first, then the front. Nothing was missing. But as I looked at the driver's seat, my eyes froze. There, on the hood of my car, was something that sent a shiver down my spine. The pennies. They were arranged in a perfect heart shape. I stepped back, my mind spinning. The warmth from the pennies still lingered on the hood, almost like they had just been placed there. There was no reason for them to be there. I hadn't noticed Carl in the parking lot, but the way they were arranged, so deliberate, so meticulous, made my blood run cold. And that wasn't all. On the driver's seat, next to the pennies, was a new roll of duct tape. The same kind Carl had just bought. I stood there, my body frozen in place. My mind was racing, trying to piece it all together. Carl had left the store minutes earlier. How could he have gotten to my car before I did? And why leave the tape on my seat? I didn't know what to think. I immediately called the police. They arrived shortly after, and I explained everything to them. The coins, the tape, the footage, Carl's odd behavior. But when they tried to track Carl down, they couldn't find him. "Are you sure it was him?" one of the officers asked, his voice skeptical. "Maybe he was just messing around. It's not illegal to leave pennies on a car." But I knew better. Something was off. I couldn't shake the feeling that Carl had been watching me, planning this out. The fact that he'd left the tape, the fact that he'd smiled as he placed the pennies on my car, it was too deliberate. The police told me they would keep an eye out for him. But after that night, Carl never came back to the Dollar Tree. He never appeared again. But I couldn't stop wondering. What was he trying to do with the tape and the pennies? Why leave such a personal mark on my car? I never saw Carl again. But every time I park my car, I can't help but check the locks and the pennies. I wonder if I'll ever understand what he was trying to tell me, or if he'll show up again when I least expect it.